Can you dim that light just a sec? I have very sensitive eyes. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Daniels faculty tonight. My name's Robert Levitt. I'm the acting dean, in case any of you don't know. But as usual, before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this is a meeting place. This meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. So, thank you all for attending this evening's inaugural Harold Solomon Kaplan Lecture. Tonight's lecture honors the legacy of a prominent Toronto architect, Harold Solomon Kaplan, who in partnership with Abraham Sprackman in their firm Kaplan and Sprackman Architects had a most, I would say, very interesting practice in which they built a large portion of Toronto's synagogues and movie theaters. Certainly those seem like different kinds of gathering places, but I think what binds them together as institutional types, one sacred, one profane, is that they're really both places of public assembly. In any case, the firm's work helped define the cultural, religious, and communal landscapes to which we are all heirs in Toronto and across Canada, from iconic Art Deco theaters to foundational Jewish community institutions, synagogues. Fact is that they designed nearly 80% of Canada's marquee movie houses, including Toronto's historic Eglinton Theatre, recently renovated, now the Eglinton Grand, and which won the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada Bronze Medal back in 1937. In 1936, they were tasked with the renovations of the Revue Cinema at 400 Roncesvalles Avenue, which continues to operate as an independent movie theater today. So we are still enjoying the fruits of Harold's design labor from half a century or more ago. So the Harold Solomon Kaplan Lecture has been established by his daughter, architect Ruthetta Kaplan Rees, and two of his grandchildren, Jonathan Rees and Rosemary Rees. And this annual lecture will celebrate Kaplan's legacy by inviting leading architects to share perspectives and advance dialogue on the architecture of collective spaces. I think something which is in the spirit of the kind of institutions that Harold was committed to designing during his life. I wanted to mention here that I had this past year I had a wonderful visit with Ruthetta and her family at Ruthetta's home in Concord, Massachusetts, where I learned a lot about, well, I wouldn't say it. I learned some more about what sounded like a very dapper and driven architect in Mr. Kaplan. I also got to see a collection of his gouaches or watercolors. Frankly, I'm not sure which, but they're of his Deco movie theaters, and I do hope that at some point we are able to get some examples of that for show at the Daniels faculty in the future. They belong to a very remarkable age and moment in Toronto's history. It would be great to have them here. I also wanted to share an important fact about Harold's daughter, Ruthetta Kaplan Rees, who was the first woman to graduate from U of T's School of Architecture. That was in 1949. It was great also to be able to hear from her a little bit about these experiences during my visit. Just by the way, before becoming a standalone school that year, the School of Architecture had been a department within the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering, and where Ruthetta was only one of two women students. I have to say, I'm very glad we're a standalone faculty now. She went on to practice at offices in New York and Connecticut, and later studied horticulture, completing a certificate in landscape design and at the New York Botanical Gardens. So she actually kind of joins together in her own career path some of our own ambitions here to synthesize the different design disciplines in architecture, landscape architecture, and ultimately in the city. So there's another little detail of interest, which is that the faculty's benefactor, John H. Daniels, who gave his name to this faculty, actually worked in the firm of Kaplan and Sprackman during his apprenticeship. So there's a kind of interesting full circle here. So thank you again to Kaplan Reese family for their generous support and commitment to the Daniels faculty, and a large number of them are here in the front row. So thank you very much. And thank you, Ruthetta, who I believe is watching on YouTube. So for the inaugural talk, we are pleased to welcome a Canadian duo, Liz Wreford, Principal Landscape Architect, and Peter Sampson, Principal Architect, and co-founders of the Winnipeg-based practice Public City. Cast as a playful but purposeful critique of the prevalence of private space in Canadian cities, Public City argues for a public realm that is layered, messy, culturally generous, and focused on well-being in the collective human experience. Peter's design work bridges public policy, cultural programming, and meaningful community engagement. His projects span from transitional housing to public washrooms to community theaters and local libraries. In other words, he is willing to work on the smallest arenas of civic life as well as large institutional ones. Committed to design excellence and public impact, he led the Governor General's medal-winning Forest Pavilion, which is located on Treaty 1 land within the floodway zone of the Winnipeg's Red River. Liz leads the firm's work in inclusive, culturally resonant, and ecologically responsive public spaces. And her leadership has shaped award-winning projects including the 2S LGBTQI+ National Monument in Ottawa, Park in Calgary, and Manitobagan in Winnipeg. Did I say that right? Manitobagan. Toboggan. I had to say that a few times. I once had to learn how to say Alberta, not Alberta. Like Bert, like Robert. Yeah. So she's a committed advocate for design equity and mentorship, and founded the Prairie chapter of Building Equality in Architecture, and serves as a council director with the Winnipeg Arts Council. So tonight's lecture is going to focus on their engaged works of civic design, which I'm excited to learn about. But I did think I would mention here just one little anecdote. Some years ago, maybe 15 or more, on my first visit to Winnipeg, I had been forewarned by many of my friends and colleagues in Toronto and Montreal about my visit to Winnipeg, and they didn't, let me just say, they didn't have high hopes for enjoying it. But, you know, Upper Canada snobbery. So I made my way out there, and Peter took me on a tour of the city. And I have to say that he had his affectionate regard for the city turned all those warnings on their head. And I felt that I discovered that Peter is an optimist. The glass is half full. And he was a model, I thought, for the kind of empathy that made it possible for an architect to contribute positively to the work in cities. I mean, it reminds me of something that I was once told by one of my mentors. I one time asked Alvaro Siza what his favorite cities were, and he told me that he loved all of them. And I thought maybe he exaggerated, but I did think that it was a good sign. I mean, in a way, it meant that he was able to see the value in a very diverse, in very diverse environments, And it meant that he was someone who had tremendous empathy, and I thought that Peter demonstrated that. Then afterwards, I went and I visited what was a different space for their office with Liz and Peter, and found that in their office that same spirit prevailed, and it felt like a very, very, very positive space of design and commitment to the city of Winnipeg. It's very inspiring. So. I think that's all on my anecdote. At the end of the presentation today, I'll sit with Liz and Peter and ask them some questions. Maybe they won't all be softballs. And then I will turn it out to the audience to do their will with two of you. So please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. Well, can we go home now? Because that was so nice. I don't want anybody to get to know us for real now, because I like that version. That was just fine. All fibs, I'll take them. Just give us a quick second here to get our self sorted out here. We're not going to read, but we will if we have to. We have a lot of slides to go through, and we are going to pass it back and forth between the two of us, but we have one monitor here, so we'll try not to fumble too much. This is Flat Park. We're just going to jump right into it. We practice for a city. Well, let me just say public acts. That's really what we're calling this talk tonight. Work in the margins, marginalized objects, sites, programs, and communities are the territory of the public city that we tend to practice for. We practice for a city in its human life below 6 stories. This statement guides us. It guides our studio to design with our heads down on the land and where we live, whether it's in urban environments or otherwise. Flat Park here pulls a dwelling unit out of the sky. It folds it up and it places it on the ground in a 10-foot by 20-foot parking stall on King Street West, in your King Street West, that is, here in Toronto. It is a dwelling park. It is the temporary installation of a competition that we were part of in 2019. And we like to think that it was so loved that it remained for 4 years, but we found out later that it was just too bloody heavy for the city to move it. So it stayed in place. This is us installing it at 3 a.m. in the morning on July 1st in 2019. And it really captures a kind of marginalized moment of what territory is left for us to build in the city when the free market consumes everything easy. And those of us who are committed to public work, for whatever reason we continue to do that and eke out the margins of work, we find ourselves constantly struggling with where is the space and where is the territory to express who we are now as a culture, trying to describe their identity in the public realm. And so Winnipeg gave you this, and this is what you did with it. But it's okay. That's the point. We've learned in the public work that we do, we have learned that practice is a public act, and if it's a public act, that means we have to learn to let it go. So, I'm Peter, and this is my partner Liz, of course, and you're going to hear from both of us, and thank you for inviting us tonight to close out the 25-26 lecture season here at the Daniels, and to, of course, inaugurate the first annual Harold Solomon Kaplan Lecture. It's an honor to be here with his descendants. Thank you for joining us. We had a great conversation with you before the lecture tonight. It's been really nice to get to know all of you. It's really nice to see old friends in the room. I see another friend in the back. I see friends everywhere. It's so nice to come back to my alma mater and be able to share what I've been doing for the last 30, 40 years. 30 years? I don't know. 10 years will do. It's also very special to be a father tonight. It's really nice to have my son in the crowd who's graduating this year from the Daniels. It makes me very proud. And if my count is right, I think he's the 3rd Sampson to come out of this school. And the first of them being my friend and my mentor, Barry, who I know many of us still miss deeply, who has put his sort of foundational footprint in many of us. So not as a boot, not a footprint, but kind of like a footprint. I remember the odd footprint from Barrie, just like, ouch, that hurt, yeah. Anyway, we're going to do our best tonight to honor Mr. Kaplan's legacy and his commitment to the design of collective space, to the design of belonging in the public realm through the hybrid practice of architecture and landscape architecture that Liz and I lead, and a topic that is very important to our practice. Over to you.
Okay.
Sucker.
So, yes, as Robert said, our practice, we practice from Winnipeg. That's where our main office is. We also have an office in Edmonton, and we used to have an office in Toronto, but we don't anymore. Most of our work is not in Winnipeg, but so we kind of live halfway between, you know, nowhere and everywhere. And the projects that we're going to talk about tonight are in Alberta, and in
Alberta, Robert, Alberta.
and in Toronto and in Ottawa. And so, in addition to being business owners of an architecture and landscape architecture company, we also recently acquired this building, which Public City offices are on the second and third floor, and along with the building came a bar, which we opened. This building is called the Langside Grocery. It was built in 1919 in Winnipeg, and it's in an inner city neighborhood, one of the few kind of corner grocery stores that are still intact in the city. And so we've been quite busy trying to figure out how to run a business upstairs and another business downstairs, and kind of living the dream that everybody thinks is the most amazing thing ever for an architect to have a bar downstairs under their office, which is great and very dangerous. But
Our back door leads right into the kitchen,
yeah.
which leads right to the bar, and you don't even have to go to it. Yeah, it's very bad. But it's also helpful.
Yeah, so we've been having a lot of fun with that. It's sort of our new project, along with all of our other projects. We've found that people in Winnipeg are much more interested in us owning a bar than us being architects. So we've had all sorts of, we've been meeting a lot of new people and making new connections. And opening up the bar is really a community space, which is the point, and I think consistent with the work that we do and consistent with the spirit of Winnipeg. And this is a picture of the river trail in Winnipeg, which is one of the longest natural skating trails in the world. This happens every year in the winter in Winnipeg. And it's amazing because it's this public space that doesn't exist for half of the year, and then all of a sudden it's like the busiest, most amazing place to be on, with lots of different communities and neighbors. And it really, I think, encapsulates the spirit of how people think about public space in Winnipeg in particular. And it's where we come from. So this kind of like down and dirty, getting our hands like messy, building a lot of our projects. We built this one, Hygge House. And as Peter said, sort of inhabiting the spaces in between, the marginalized spaces that we are left with as practitioners looking at public space, and just like inhabiting these kind of leftover marginal spaces. It can be on the river, it can be in back alleys. A lot of the projects that we're going to talk about here, we just sort of made up ourselves. And it's the way that we can practice what we love to do, with the intent that it gets translated into something bigger over time, and it is starting to do that. And we'll kind of get to that at the end of the projects that we're talking about here. So those are some of the projects that I started with on my own in Winnipeg, and Peter was at the same time kind of starting with these projects here.
And I think it comes from the same place. I think the gift that working in a place like Winnipeg gives you when you're somebody who has grown up in Eastern Canada and between Montreal and Toronto, and you end up in Winnipeg, you believe there's kind of a can-do attitude, and you kind of celebrate that, but you really realize it's a make-do attitude. And the make-do attitude is actually really liberating. It means that you have an opportunity to bring a lot of solutions to the table as an architect when you go into public meetings. procurement might be a little bit less rigorous than it is in cities like here, so we can come in with solutions and actually have support in how we might solve a problem. So in this case, we were working with the University of Winnipeg to create a bike lab. And the bike lab problem was, probably a $7 million problem that the university couldn't solve. And rather than watch that project evaporate, we were a small office at the time, and we constructed a narrative around using castaway containers and building from nothing, and maybe sort of taking advantage of this condition that Winnipeg is, which is the end of the line. It's the end of distribution chains in Winnipeg. Things are left there a little bit like glacial till. It's the end of the industrial free market. Things get unpacked in shipping containers. We are not a manufacturing city. We are a distribution and intellectual and service city and a resource city for the land around us. We don't tend to pack shipping containers up and send them back home. So they get left in Winnipeg. So I've always sort of likened shipping containers to industrial till and said that is the resource of where we work. So we can use it and we can make fantastic projects from these things. We were discovering that this little narrative we'd started with the University of Winnipeg, that it worked for the city as well. And when we were working at the Assiniboine Conservancy, we came to them with the same solution. They had some $1 million deficit that they couldn't build the public washrooms that they wanted, and we just approached them and said, well, there is a way. We can build this washroom for you for $340,000, and here's how we can do it, and we just manufactured a project for ourselves out of that. So as two starting offices, we had to sort of have that make-do attitude of, I don't have any projects coming in as a small office, but I certainly have the capacity to bring my design intellect and bring my design prowess and problem-solving skills and bring it to our clients. And so we started to found our projects on that. So that's kind of a route that gets us to public city. Gritty, making stuff, building stuff, and we formulated a public practice that really wanted to look between architecture and landscape architecture for new territory. It doesn't mean we don't do this stuff. We do a lot of this stuff. We do a lot of capital A architecture, and we'll come back for another lecture on that sometime, I hope. But these are two libraries at the top. At the bottom is a 300-seat theater in northern Manitoba that we built very intimately with an Indigenous community and a school division to create a kind of hybrid space for the town and for the school. And it's a very exciting project, and we're just still ruminating about it because it just opened about 4 weeks ago, and we haven't collected all our thoughts on how to talk about it yet, but it was an absolutely marvelous process to go through. And at the bottom, another library. And we show these projects because these are our spaces of belonging. These are the sort of public realm architecture projects that landscape architect and architect have designed together. These have not just been designed by the architecture department at Public Realm, but they've been spearheaded by the two of us in putting those ideas forward about what the public realm is today in Canada and what's left. And there's lots of marginalized spaces to talk around these projects, but we're not going to focus on that today. Also, capital L, landscape architecture.
And we're not going to talk about them either.
We're not talking about them either.
But we do them.
I guess we're putting that on the table because we don't want to leave an impression that it's small, fanciful work that we're doing, and it's we get a lot of words like cute.
Or whimsical.
Or whimsical.
Or public art.
Or public art.
None of what we do are any of those.
We're not particularly interested in that. Neither of us are artists, and neither of us are particularly whimsical.
No.
But it's the line that we're really interested in. We think it's a territory. It's not a division. We actually think there's ground here that we've been kind of scratching at. And the beautiful thing about practice is it concludes nothing. It's really a portfolio of work that builds up over a career, and it's somebody else's job to see if it meant anything. It's a bit like writing a book. I don't know. Is it good? Somebody else is going to decide that. But we do come back to the shared work constantly, no matter which side of this line we're working on, because this is the place where we test our values for practice. So we're going to introduce you to Park in Alberta, and that's over to Liz.
So we're going to go through a few projects that we think are on that line. They're the projects that Peter and I work together on most closely. None of them really have doors, but they're still architecture, and they're still landscape architecture, and they're still kind of both. So we're trying to define these types of projects, and we just wanted to introduce you to a few of them today. This is Park in Calgary. For this project, we were tasked to create a public space from a surface parking lot in a neighborhood near downtown, but keep the parking. So this is a view of it. Yeah, so a park in the park. This is a view. You can see it's sort of on a commercial strip and adjacent to a residential neighborhood. And what we proposed was the only space available on this site were the lines that were painted on the parking lot between where the cars park. So all of the elements of the park had to come up from those lines. So we proposed these kind of park icons that would pop up from in between cars, and cars could actually continue.
Like literally on the painted line of a car, because that was the only site we could give up.
Yeah. So these were our sort of park elements, and these were all constructed in Winnipeg. The same person that constructed Flat Park, and put on a truck and taken out to Calgary, where it was installed on the site in about 4 or 5 days. So it was like park in a box, like actually, and but it spread out over this whole parking lot within a couple of days. There were elements like picnic tables that folded out, a fire that you could actually warm your hands in with like a hot air blower. There were like phone chargers and all sorts of like little elements that people could use within this space and kind of encourage them to do things like skateboard or play basketball. But you can see that the cars are still parking in there. So we lost a couple of parking spaces, but it's an interesting model because it does allow public space to still create revenue for their owner, which in this case was the Calgary Parking Authority. The community really engaged with this site. It was used a lot for markets and events. It had a lot of presence on the site because we installed a scaffolding around the whole park that was kind of about the same scale as the commercial buildings around it, so you could see it from far away. It became really part of the streetscape. We talk a lot about having to go up in winter cities in the prairies just to have presence when we're working in the landscape, and this was a good example of that. It was supposed to be there for 2 years and was very loved and lasted for 4, but there was no money to maintain it and no invested community group that was maintaining it. So they had to take it away. It's now a surface parking lot again. And from that, we started working with the Beltline Neighborhoods Association, also in Calgary, on a project called High Park. This was the top level of a 5-level parking garage in downtown Calgary that was kind of given over to the community association from the Calgary Parking Authority during COVID because there was a real lack of open space for people that lived in the neighborhood. And the only place that was available was a car park. And so we were given this task to create a park out of, like, I don't know, a 1.5 acre site for like $100,000 or something in the middle of COVID when you couldn't even get anything. So we kind of created this concept of this long linear park. We did a boardwalk and a couple little things on the side. You can see the picnic tables are a little modified so that you're sitting 6 feet apart from each other. That was a total COVID relic, and we feel like that should be like in a museum or something. And what people started to do after COVID was put them together so you could sit 4 people. But this was the first phase of it, and we also developed this while in COVID when we weren't seeing anybody. And Peter and I were driving across the country at some point and drove past a train that had happy birthday on the side of it. This isn't it, this is just another picture, but we thought that was just like the coolest thing, that you could just write happy birthday on the side of a train, and like anyone who it happened to be their birthday might see it.
Might feel really lucky.
And then like you're getting a message to somebody and you don't even know who it is.
We also love this idea of like heavy infrastructure, like heavy national infrastructure as social media.
Yeah.
It was like analog version
Yeah,
during
totally.
COVID. It was super fun.
Yeah, when the only way to really interact with people was through like sending them messages.
Yeah,
It wasn't really ever talking to them.
Yeah. So that was an inspiration for the messaging on this project.
It inspired us to propose these little parklets along the boardwalk that all had messages. So people were mostly visiting by themselves or in small groups, and we were imagining that they would use social media to like take photos or send photos of this place to their friend and give them messages. So we did have a happy birthday sign. We've missed you so much. This could be the best day of my life, and we are so lucky. There was a we love you and a few other ones too. So it was really quickly adopted by the community, and over time, High Park has been really, really successful. It's been there, well, since COVID. It's still going really strong. The Beltline Beltline Neighborhoods Association, is an amazing steward of this place. They have a huge amount of volunteers. They clean it. They program it all the time. This is during like a graffiti thing that they had there. It keeps evolving. We added basketball courts, which seems really simple, but was actually like the hardest thing we could do up there, because basketball's 5 floors in the air and nothing to connect anything to, because the parking garage is like that thick. The surface was really hard. But that's being used by a lot of different communities. It's grown over time. There's events there. They have movie nights there. And it's just been like a really integral part of the community in the Beltline neighborhood. So this only could continue to happen because of the people that are looking after it. It's interesting to see the difference between this space and Park, which just kind of lived out its life and then had to be taken away. This is going to keep living. So we know why. We know why this works and why some don't. Yeah.
And that's an interesting segue into this project. So we're on home turf here. We're not involved with this project, but we were following this story at the fairgrounds here, I think in Toronto. It really has to do with the construction of pickleball courts in on an underused lot. And it's a very interesting problem. It's a great initiative. There's a group who looks after this, but there's a user fee and there's a charge, and of course that's triggered a discussion with the city of Toronto about taxation. And if you're following this story, you know there's a bit of, I guess, there's argument starting to take place about whose space is this and what do we tax, and is it retail or is it not retail, is it public realm? And we don't really have a position on that yet, but we do have solutions to it that we're starting to study through our own work. And I think a lot of those kinds of projects that we have been working with have to do with stewardship, in championing stewardship over user fee or stewardship over surveillance. And engagement is the way to make that happen. It's about bringing the story to the user groups right at the get-go and making sure there's buy-in, and then it's working with the bureaucracies to develop that. And one thing we always remind ourselves, and we have this paintbrush in our studio as a reminder that the dream is the public city, and the public city is open to all, but we often get faced with open to all but closed to some. And all of you who are architects and professionals have faced that challenge, whether it's the design of a park bench with bars on it so people can't lie down, or it happens to be, a user fee at a gate, or a turnstile on the way into City Hall, or a security guard that you're confronted with. These are the things that challenge us to ask ourselves, what kind of city are we constantly designing for? And is our dream naive? Of course it's naive. But is it hopeful? Yes. And we maintain hope, and we maintain the commitment to continuing on to think about public space as something that is not gated and is not necessarily closed to some.
and isn't commodified. And I think
this is an interesting story on that note.
And this is a personal example of that happening, where we designed Croca Curl, which is a combo of curling and crokinole, and it was instantly super popular across Canada. It was built like all across the country, and we were really happy to give it away. We gave everybody like how-tos, and we answered all the emails, and for years we got so much feedback and people just building it all over the place, and we loved that. That was just, we didn't get paid a cent for this project. We just put it out in the world.
Once a friend of ours asked us if we were not-for-profit, and we said, well, I guess that could be true, but Linux worked, and it was also open platform, and this is kind of just like open platform design. Like sometimes you just have a really good idea, and you just don't want to wait for somebody to buy it. You just want to get it out into the world and see what happens to it. So it comes back to that mantra of the art of public practice is about giving things away sometimes. You just have to see what happens with them and let it come back to you a few years later and tell you a story.
And sometimes what happens to them is that people take them and charge $85 for 45 minutes to play them, which is what happens in Toronto.
But not in Saskatoon and not in Minneapolis either.
No.
And not in Eau Claire.
No.
Like, it's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. We're not mad about it. We're not mad.
But that's how we wanted to see what would happen.
Yeah.
So public research.
That's what happened.
So the open, back on the subject of doorless architecture. This is a public washroom in Calgary. It was a commission that we earned through a competition, but also through, I think, the work that we had been doing on the subject of open architectures. This is a building, but it's not a building. You know, it's hard to enter this into standard categorized awards because, you know, the juries don't know what to do with it. I don't know it's landscape architecture. I don't know it's art. I don't know it's building. But we actually think it's all of them. And I think there's many examples of categoryless architecture that challenges the non-architects about how to use space and ask themselves what these things are that show up in their world. This is a public washroom. The program commission, the brief was for a public washroom with a one-line question that didn't come from the architects, it came from the procurement group that said, and would you help us understand how to make it into a place? And so we won that competition by introducing pickleball to the problem of a public washroom, which I'll get into in a moment. Because, you know, that just makes sense. Like, if you have a public washroom, pickleball is the solution. So the other problem was how to locate it. So we had the confluence, which is this area around the historic fort in Calgary, and we could be anywhere in that region. And so, you know, being from Winnipeg, being budget-minded on absolutely everything we do because we live in the low market and we live at the bottom of the economy in the middle of the country, we have to be resourceful all of the time. So, you know, I'm going to throw this out there. We're very comfortable making public infrastructure at $113 a square foot. Like, we know how to do it, and I know it can't be done in Toronto, which, you know, probably says, I don't know, we've tried what we do in other cities, and it works in some cities, and it doesn't work in other cities. It's a mindset, and it applies to certain places. Calgary really gets it. And they have the same public space infrastructure problems that we do. They have the same social problems as Toronto, but they might not have the capacity or the infrastructure behind them already. They're building it up as a new city, so it's, you know, it's a different time. The city's been commodified, the free market has taken over, public institutions have to eke out space to solve public problems. And in the new city, it becomes a challenge that we're just interested in solving. So the first thing we did was put it close to the street. But the benefit of putting it close to the street was it actually gave a public washroom, generally something that all of us would think about casting away in the corners of a city, presence. And we placed it at the intersection of a street because, you know, if we lean into Jane Jacobs, we know that eyes on the street, we know that mums and dads around playgrounds just change the atmosphere of public infrastructure. And if we can bring people here, and if we can program it, and we can program it nightly, and if we can create flair and vibrancy around it, it will succeed. And we can tell the story, with procurement officers that, this washroom that is just a wedge of program itself deserves so much more programming around it, and we can do it with a light touch. So we spent the budget on the wedge, which is showing here, and then the activation pieces and the wrap and all that could kind of come in for a very light dollar a square foot and not make a building, but create the presence of building and create the presence of investment in the public realm for that group. I'm going to come back to talk about that, but those ideas are something that we were exploring in Winnipeg on the Forest Pavilion. We had the same problem and the same challenge here. In the yellow square in this image is the public washroom, and that was the ask of the city of Winnipeg. And we brought to that challenge more. Less is not the answer. More is the answer. We can't do less in the public realm. We need to do more. And I mean, it's a crazy thing to say to a bureaucrat, but they agreed. And we got a little extra money to make more fence and turn that fence and territory around the public washroom into place and to create meaningful spaces around the washroom that could then have adjacent relationships to the park. So in the upper part of this image, you can see 4, 5, 6, and 3. That's all insulated space. It's got a roof. It's got a floor slab. It's got all that stuff we expect in a building. Check. We've provided that program in the smallest footprint we can, and we've spread that budget around on open spaces 8, 9, and 11, which I'll show you pictures of in a moment, that are really just fence space. They're just very light, but they create presence, and they create the sense that, if somebody wants to go and territorialize a public washroom, which is a natural thing for certain groups to do because they also need shelter and they also need basic human dignity and need access to things like water that the rest of us have access to, they tend to territorialize the things that feel a little bit hidden away. And so the solution here to create presence and I don't know, I'm going to lean into Robert, you were so kind to me, but Robert and I once had this conversation about, the territory of architecture is like awe. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but I stick with it. And I believe that in the public realm, awe has a profound impact on a community to start to trigger things like stewardship. And they will come and they will look after it. And I'll show you this great picture that comes along with it. These are the sketches that go along with it. This building sits in a floodplain. It's on a very marginalized territory of the park. The last little bit of land shown here in orange is the part that doesn't flood at high water in this area. And we put the building around all of that. You can see these floodline protection here. The building's built around floodline. It's a different story. The whole park does get covered, and this building has to be able to deal with that. But it also has to be able to deal with everyday programming. And the people who come and look after this park are not the people who wear uniforms and have salaries and jobs appointed to them by their union. These are the neighbors who have just come to love this place so much because the city elected to put so much time and effort into their public washroom problem. So this becomes a living room to the neighborhood, but it's hardly architecture, capital A, in the sense that we might look at it. It has very few doors. It stays open 20 hours a day. It's really only closed in the summer for 4 hours, and that's only because of shifting schedules with the security officers who drive through the park. The neighborhood rallies around it. What does this have to do with the open? It has to do with the same kind of psychology that we take to the design of the public realm, where we think of public washrooms as bunkers. We think of them as dark and dank, and we put stainless steel toilets in them, and they're basically prison grade. And we're taking a very opposite point of view to that. We're saying, no, what if it was delicate, and what if it was welcoming, and what if it was open, and what if we challenged the status quo to say it had to survive abuse? What if we accepted that abuse might be the story that we looked at? A little bit like the flat park image I showed you in the beginning. Abuse is just a natural part of being in the city. We accept it. We don't have to defend against it. We have to acknowledge how to live with it and maintain it and work around it. This building, pickleball court on the back, you might have picked up that we happen to like color. So, you can figure out why it's purple. I don't know. But pickleball in the court in the back, the washrooms in the front end of the yellow. You can see it here in this section, that the actual program space is very small. This is the form of the green mass around the pickleball court is designed with a micro mesh chain link fence, just vinyl wrapped. Very simple, very low cost materials around here. We actually managed to get a green roof into this project as well, so we've managed to eke out a little bit of public money and spend it well, and everything's surviving well, but there are no doors. This isn't locked at night, it's open. We've been asked now to see if we could put door locks on it, and we are advocating for no as the architects. Even though we'll probably lose the fight, we are advocating for no because the principles of open are open and the principles of public are public. We don't want a user fee, we don't want the gatekeeper here. And this is inside, the washrooms feel private, the sinks face the street, everything feels easy, you know, there's 2 doors in and out, it's easy to surveil. That's not a stainless steel toilet. That feels pretty good. We're spending public money on public people because it's our money and it's our space, and we're not trying to feel bad about spending money on ourselves. We want to look after the public realm the way we look after our home. So we encourage, I will tell a very quick story, I'm sorry, because we have a way more interesting story coming, but I sat in a meeting with the security department on this project in Calgary, and I listened to a member of the city of Calgary tell me that his belief was that every tax-paying member of society should carry a key fob so that they can get into City Hall and get into public washrooms. And I did actually invite him to leave, and I said, and leave your job at the door so somebody more humane can take it. This idea that we have people who think that the public realm is theirs and that we should keep people out of it is a very sorry state of municipal affairs, and we are confronted with it all the time. And it is up to us as the professionals to kick against it and constantly remind people that we own this realm, and it is ours, and it is theirs. These are the lovely stewards who have lived very difficult lives in Calgary. They have lived on the street. They have escaped abusive relationships, and they now have jobs at the open. They live here, they welcome people. They don't live, I'm sorry, they spend their day here. They welcome people, they don't ticket people, they don't ask why you are here, because they know what it's like to live on the street. They welcome the Uber drivers, they welcome the members of civic life who are riding to work, and they welcome those who have addictions, who need dignity and need a place to go as well. Everybody gets their place at their home, which I think is just a really successful moment in that story. And it's equally joined by this one where the neighbors are there at night having a fire in the Forest Pavilion at night after they've done their rounds of checking in on the building, making sure everything's great. They have a little cookout and then they go home. So nice story. Now for the grand finale. This project is wicked cool. Liz.
I hope, yes, we still have some time. Okay, good. Okay, so now I want to talk about Thunderhead, which is the 2S LGBTQI+ national monument that is being built in Ottawa right now. It's in construction in Ottawa and will be finished in this summer. It's going to be opening this summer. It's located just south of the Parliament building and right along the Ottawa River. You could see in the circle monument site there. The project is in collaboration with Canadian Heritage and the LGBT Purge Fund. The National Capital Commission is facilitating the development of the monument, and it is being built to recognize the systematic discrimination and harm caused to 2S LGBTQI+ people in Canada at the hands of the federal government during a state-sanctioned practice known as the LGBT Purge, which most people don't know anything about. It's a very dark time in Canadian history. The LGBT Purge continued for over 40 years and saw roughly 9,000 lives destroyed by interrogation, abuse, and psychological trauma inflicted upon the 2S LGBTQI+ public service members by their employer, the Government of Canada. We were particularly impacted by a 2018 documentary called The Fruit Machine, which illustrated in brutal terms the way in which the federal government systematically hunted down LGBT men and women employed in Canadian public service, the RCMP, and the military. You can Google Fruit Machine, and it's actually the documentary, you can access it through the Government of Canada website. In 2021, there was an international design competition for this monument, which was then called the LGBTQ2+ National Monument, and we won the competition in early 2022. The design team for the monument is led by Public City, along with performance artist Shauna Dempsey and Laurie Milan, and Two-Spirit knowledge keeper and activist Albert McLeod. Our whole team is from Winnipeg, which we're very proud of. There were a lot of huge players in this competition. We were the little tiny fish in it. So we're really happy to be working on this project. It's very meaningful for us. Canada and many other nations continue to face the toppling, dismantling, and destruction of monuments, often dedicated to racist and colonial histories that represent harmful and retrograde ideals. The 2S in the monument's name, which was moved to the front of the name of the monument recently, stands for Two-Spirit people who were also persecuted and harmed by the government in various ways, including being forced to go to residential schools where their identity was completely erased. The photo on the left was where a statue of Queen Victoria once stood and was toppled during the discovery of mass graves at residential schools across Canada. All of this was the context of what we were designing in, so this was all happening during the design competition. So we were one of the shortlisted teams, and we started the design process again during COVID, which was challenging. We never went to the site because we couldn't travel. A lot of other teams were from this area, so they could see it. But we worked together with the artists very closely. It was a really interesting relationship because they were performance artists, which we had never worked with before. But they didn't really make physical things. So it was a huge step out of their comfort zone, and we had to learn how to work together, but we almost worked with them as a client, so we bounced ideas off them throughout the process. And one of the times that we met, Laurie Milan gave us these sketches of thunderhead clouds, which she was thinking about, and talked about them as being dynamic natural phenomena that she felt evoked the power of activism and progress. Thunderhead clouds bring destruction and also renewal. They were frightening, but also hopeful. And these sketches were the beginning of Thunderhead. And as Albert would later teach us, these storm systems are the home of the thunderers. They can be terrifying, beautiful, and welcome natural forces which ravage and renew the land. In Albert's words, clouds give water, they sustain us. In Ojibwe understanding, they are the home of the thunderers who take the shape of the thunderbirds, who represent power, protection, strength, and the connection between sky and earth. The thunderers cleanse the land and set things right. So, given all that, we started to experiment with how to build a cloud, but found that capturing the ephemeral qualities of a cloud with earthly material to be a bit of a challenge. We talked about steel and glass and mesh, but we realized was that instead of being a physical object itself, the cloud was perhaps the absence of an object or a void. We also agreed as a team that while recognizing the historic misdeeds and injustices and communicating the gravity of the purge, we also needed to celebrate the joy and optimism of the 2S LGBTQI+ community in the past, present, and future. So we thought of disco balls and immediately fell in love with the idea of somehow integrating them into this structure. And at this point, we were like imagining like a disco ball thunder cloud that wasn't an object, but an absence of one. And that's super easy and like, yeah, done. But we figured it out and modeled various forms of what this thing could be. And what resulted was Thunderhead. I'm just going to play this video. It's 1.5 minutes. As part of the competition submittal, we were required to submit a video, and I think it's the best way to just give a really quick overview of the design, and you also get to meet the team members. So I'll play it now.
We're the only all-Canadian team. We're a primarily queer team. We are the purge generation.
We've been purged from Canadian history.
Our friends, our lovers were hounded out of the military. We're subjected to violence in the streets of this country. We have a huge responsibility to honor all of those lives. We need to create a monument to embody the creativity, the passion of our communities.
We were talking about how a thunderhead brings a sense of awe, and it brings a sense of fear, and it can be destructive, but it can also provide growth, and it can provide new life. It's as if we tried to contain the cloud that disappeared. It just left an imprint of itself within the monument, and the void becomes the monument. As you enter the site, you're confronted by a curving wall that provides the history of the purge.
There's two stages within this monument. One faces inwards. It's perfect for vigils, small gatherings, individual contemplative moments. The other thrusts outward from the base of the monument itself. You can have larger performances, bands, protests. There's a fire pit around which people can gather as points of remembrance and healing.
It needs to be a place for people to be seen and heard and given a voice. It can be a place for big performances or really intimate moments.
There's always hope, no matter what we're confronted with. And this is a physical demonstration of that for our nation.
We won, obviously. and over the past, thank you. And we do sort of see this project as like the culmination of all those ones we were doing before. It led to this. Throughout the past 4 years, the design has evolved, but actually not very significantly. So most of the remaining images are actually what's being built right now. It looks almost exactly like this. Our proposal for the site was structured around a journey from south to north, moving through a series of carefully considered landscapes and forms telling the story of the purge and Thunderhead. Here's a view of it in the daytime. And this is a plan, so you can see Thunderhead is in the middle, but there's also a very large park around the monument itself. There's a tribute area with a tree. There's a lot of interpretive elements. There's a fruit orchard, which Shauna and Lori insisted on.
Gotta have one.
Yeah. And it's also a natural amphitheater, so the whole site slopes down. So it's really an event site with a stage at the middle of it, which is Thunderhead, which came from the performance artists that we were working with. It was so important for them to be able to make sure their voices could be heard in this place. We did a lot of 3D printing of models throughout the next part of this. I don't think we could have figured out how to build this if we weren't 3D printing. Noel actually did a lot of the modeling to get us here. And so we were modeling like the voids and the shells and trying to figure out how to do this. And eventually we did. And we had to simplify the forms a little bit. We took a bridge out that used to be there. That's not there anymore. But overall, it really didn't change very much. You can see the scale of it. It's 24 feet in diameter and 30 feet high. It's really huge. Oh, I didn't have that there. Oh, shoot. And then we've been working with, so in the end, we ended up figuring out what material to make this out of, because that was also a real challenge. It's being constructed out of glass fiber reinforced concrete and in a shop in Calgary. So we've spent a lot of time with the fabricators in Calgary. These are the shop drawings that took 2 years.
Forever.
2 years to get to, or something like that. And then this was the first mock-up review that we did in Calgary with actually the Purge Fund client, Michelle Douglas, is right in the middle there. She came with us. They've been very involved the whole time. Yeah. The material works really well for this because it's formed and sort of sprayed on, but it's very durable. You can see the steel structure that Peter's inside of here. And here's an image of all of the form work for the inside of Thunderhead.
So the entire 40,000 square foot warehouse has had, it's like a Lego set. Every single piece of the monument is labeled and assigned, you know, a space on the truck, a space on the floor about how it has to get to the truck, and it sort of arrives to Ottawa as a kind of just-in-time delivery system. It comes off the truck, it goes to a staging area, and it goes on the model. It's been a really kind of integrated process of working very closely with this shop and getting the material to Ottawa to keep everything moving smoothly on site.
And we think we probably wouldn't have been able to do this kind of work as successfully if we hadn't had a background in things like that warming hut or the shipping containers, where we were really involved in the making of things. And it led to this, like I said, and we're very comfortable working with fabricators. So we could work collaboratively with them to make sure it was right. We've been working with the tilers as well. So this was the tiling mock-up. This is the disco ball tile, which is starting on site like today, and it's going to be so amazing. There's also a really important Indigenous component to this project. Through working with Albert, it's very integrated in the design. This is a medicinal garden that you walk around after you get to Thunderhead, and it leads you to a healing circle that's in line with Thunderhead. And what we did here was we collected a stone from a two-spirit elder from every province and territory across Canada, and they went and chose the stone and then transported it to Ottawa, which was a whole project in itself and actually was so hard to do. We just got the last stone from Yukon 2 days ago, delivered to Ottawa, and they're being installed on Monday on the site. They're all really beautiful and unique stones, and we're able to commission a documentary just on this process. So that eventually will be coming out as well. We did mock-ups in the NCC warehouse to try and figure out where all these stones would go. Turns out that there isn't a lot of stone available in PEI, so the PEI stone was more like sand, and it started to fall apart on the floor of the warehouse, so we've since gotten a different stone, but for the most part, it worked pretty well. And this is where they're going to go on Monday, and they're surrounded by Tyndall stone, which is the stone from Winnipeg, which was actually really important to us, but also really important to the Purge Fund, that it was included. This was about 2 weeks ago on the site. So you can see the construction of Thunderhead. So all of those pieces that you could see in the workshop are now on the site. They actually were able to put it all together. You can see the skylight up at the top and the start of the kind of on-site mock-up of the tiling. You could see the space here and, oh, sorry. Oh, I won't go back. And this video just sort of walks you through the whole space of Thunderhead. The Thunderhead void, the absence of a physical object acting as the monument, is a statement about the evolution of the community, as well as a reflection of the multitude of losses suffered by victims of the purge at the hands of the federal government. Careers, livelihoods, and lives were lost as a result of the systematic expulsion of queer public service members by the Canadian state. These traumas have gone unseen by the Canadian public for decades. Thunderhead will recognize and honor the sacrifices made by these individuals who only wish to live their lives authentically, with the freedom promised by the country in which they lived and to which they dedicated themselves. Thunderhead will also look to the future. It will be a physical representation of the beautifully nebulous and transformative nature of the 2S LGBTQI+ community, and a space where future generations can come to feel safe, seen, and heard. Thank you.
Thank you. That's us. Thank you. Now what?
Now sit down.
Now go sit down, that's it? I think... Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
That was
Robert.
that was fantastic.
Was it?
Yeah, no,
Oh,
really.
it's still playing.
It's
Oh.
still playing. Was that
Well,
going to make
that's
everybody
okay.
dizzy?
I turned it off.
Is
but
that, is
we
that
can
going
turn
to make
it
you
off.
dizzy? So we'll turn it. Okay.
Maybe turn it off.
I can turn
Yes.
it
It's affecting my peripheral.
Yes. Thought I turned it off, but just press
Boom.
pause. Maybe there.
How
We
about
go.
there?
That's good. You don't want to put the one up so we're enveloped in the
Oh, there we
a
go.
hollow disco ball?
Yeah.
No, I think that's
Oh,
better.
wait,
Now
all
we can
right, okay.
imagine it.
That's
We can
fine.
imagine it. Oh, look, see,
Anyway.
that's better.
There
you
we
go.
go,
There you go.
okay.
That's better.
Yeah, that really was that was great. That was a great arc of a story.
Are you softballing?
I said I would, but sometimes
I don't know, nice Robert.
sometimes I feel like giving softballs. You guys deserve them. But I
Thank you.
I was thinking about how maybe in a way, what is I don't really want to. If I want to use the word hardship, the hardship of Winnipeg, it sounds pejorative about Winnipeg, and I don't mean to be, but like some of the challenges there, and having to sort out how to build a practice within that context, I think created a kind of hardy and resilient and inventive strategy on your part, which you now are bringing out to other parts of Canada and perhaps elsewhere in the world. Maybe that's more a comment. You don't have to confirm that.
Well, we kind of confirm that. I mean, we are doing. We have a $28 million school renovation taking place right now in Winnipeg, but that's it. Like we don't have a lot of work in Winnipeg, and that's partly because it's not that we've outgrown the place. It's just it's a slow economy, and our work is starting to look at other things. So I think Edmonton. I mean, it's funny. We talk about Winnipeg, Calgary, and Edmonton, and there are many times one of you might call one of us and say, hey, I'm on my way to Calgary. Do you want to go out for dinner? But Winnipeg is not a suburb of Calgary, by the way. Toronto. I'm a Torontonian. I'm allowed to kick it myself. But but we have this allegiance to the prairie cities that we are realizing, for better or for worse, we are comfortable in that milieu, and I think we're invited to that environment easily because they understand the challenge the same way. And we are northern cities. All of Canada north of Sudbury is, well, Sudbury's not north, guys. Like Sault Ste. Marie is north, and then that's the rest of Canada. We're all northern cities suffering similar challenges, and of course the prairie cities share something very particular where our story makes sense in those environments. I think there's lessons learned that we bring with us to Toronto, but I don't know that it translates necessarily to this public realm in the same way. Yet.
Yeah.
Well, I think I have like two questions, but I'll start with this one. Probably have more, but
depending on how we answer it.
That would be a good question. Anyway, I am struck by the fact, there are other practices in other cities that seem to rely upon a kind of economy of means in the way that you have for instance, the use of paint and color is an economy of means.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And I remember that, for instance, the now dean of SUNY Buffalo, Julia Sersniak, she was at Syracuse for a while. And Syracuse is a lot, is pretty rotten. Nobody's here from Syracuse, but it's a pretty sad city. If I go there, I try to leave on the same day. But they were painting. She was proposing all sorts of painted strategies, and I was thinking about how that there is that strategy within that economic context. But I also was thinking about it in another context, which is not really about an economy of means in the end, but it belongs to a tradition within landscape architecture, like a change in landscape architecture. So it's kind of a question for you, Liz, that is, because I think about architects like James Corner, Claude Cormier, Martha Schwartz, where traditional notions of plant-based landscape architecture give way to color and pop and inorganic materials, and in a way, this alternate tradition of landscape architecture sort of, I feel like in some ways it's a rejection of some of the pathos, even moralizing deep ecological commitments of, say, the long Olmsted tradition that has been passed down through many generations of landscape architects. I wonder if you see yourself in relationship to this set of people or not.
Definitely, but I also think that a lot of this work isn't like a rejection of, I don't know, plants or an ecological tradition, but is also just practical.
I don't mean to make it into a binary.
No,
Sorry.
it like everything dies that I've ever planted almost. So, like, I just stopped doing it because.
And you're a landscape architect.
Yes.
She
No,
got cut-
I
she
mean,
got
like
cut from
anything
the
that I've
marketing
ever designed that had plants in it was the plants were dead within
It's
a
a
year.
Winnipeg condition more is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
or
like
Winter City.
not me personally, although I'm not great at keeping plants alive either. But
She's really selling herself.
Sorry.
My buildings do stand up.
yeah, but it's not about plants. Like plants is one material that is in our arsenal of materials,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
And in the places that we practice, there's almost no maintenance budget ever. And plants require maintenance.
Right.
And so if there isn't going to be maintenance, we're not going to plant anything.
And that's a hard
so-
conversation with you that
Yeah.
you have very clearly with clients. The
Yeah.
first thing you look at is the maintenance budget. And you say, well, I'm not going to pretend it's going to work. So we go to something else, which you talk about more as architectural landscapes are kind of a territory that solve that problem in a winter city. You go
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah, also because plants don't really do that much when you can't see them in the winter. Like in Winnipeg and Calgary, Edmonton, you know, the ground's covered for 6 or 7 months of the year. And so to really maximize the budgets that we get, which are usually pretty small, doing something that people can use or at least see for more than a few months of the year, I think for me has more impact and I think is a better use of public money.
Right. But I do think there's something I think about. I mean, I don't know if Olmsted is the only point of reference. I mean, it could be Michael van Valkenburg, who I see in the tradition of, who's doing the Ontario, the park down at Donlands here is in the Olmsted tradition. That there is an historical idea about parks bringing the wilderness into the city, and that it has there was a moral project connected with that, which is that the wilderness was a site of authenticity that would educate populations and give them an opportunity to have contact with wilderness. But the sensibility of your parkscapes seems like those of Cormier and Corner and Schwartz. They seem to be about, you're all landscape architects whose sensibilities, it seems to me, come from the city, that you validate sensibilities that arise in the city, the kind of pop feeling, I don't know, you mentioned my discussion with you about awe, but I was thinking of pizzazz. Awesome pizzazz. That these parks are happily sited within urban and urbane sensibilities, as opposed to relying upon the authenticating, moralizing gravitas of the wilderness, which is what the old landscape models and paradigms used to insist upon. Not that I think any of us here, you, me, most of us probably still love those old style parks too. So it doesn't mean that you have to reject one, but the old ones were antithetical to urban sensibilities. And for instance, in Boston, Olmsted was super vexed by the fact that buildings were going to be built around the Emerald Necklace, which of course makes it wonderful now. But anyway, but
there's a question in there though.
Yeah, well, I have trouble because I like to make comments. It comes from being a teacher for too long.
I agree.
I do agree. Next question.
But, all right. So it does lead to a question, though, because I was struck by the fact that you wanted to, I don't know if this is the right phrase, paper over you show those the library and
Yes.
dance studio,
Yeah.
which looked, they were beautiful. But they looked like they came from a very different sensibility. And then you said they're the capital A architecture projects, and they had all the kind of, not the gravitas of a landscape garden, but they had the gravitas of the capital A architecture. But you did a lot, but then you showed a lot of other architecture tonight that was of a very different sensibility. And I wonder, not that you have to be consistent,
No, it's a good question.
but
We struggle
is
with it.
there, you said that you hadn't thought about how to talk about those things, but you guys, the two of you obviously had a lot of thoughts about how to talk about what you did show. So I wonder why is that?
Because we had 55 minutes and we were respecting
No,
everybody's time.
don't escape.
No, I'm not escaping. I'm not escaping. I'm not sure the sensibility is entirely different because
Okay.
I do think the process is very similar, but I think it does yield different outcomes, maybe aesthetically. So, working very, one of the theater, if we'd planned this better with all the descendants of the Kaplan family here, we would have kind of gotten into the theater project that we were doing in the north. It's a very compelling project. We did a similar reversal of a program. We were required to do a theater on a budget that hardly existed, and we couldn't meet the performance criteria of the school. We couldn't meet the program criteria at all that the staff needed to make this new theater work. And we had to think very quickly on our heads about, well, there had been a conservative government change in Manitoba, and there was no more money going to theaters. There's no more money going to arts programs. It was all going to science and math. And so when you lose your budget mid-flight, you've got two options. You walk away as an architect, or you hang on for dear life, because how often does a theater come across your plate? Not very often. So we went back to the different departments that we'd been working with at the government and said, we know there's money to engage elders in school spaces, and that both comes in the form of teaching spaces, outdoor spaces. It also comes in the form of performance and cultural spaces. And this is not just a theater, it's a cultural performance space. And when we changed that language with the government, they found different drawers of money that would flow to this project. We took the backstage of that project and we turned it into the most important part of the project. It's filled with glass. It is a ceremonial space. It's a workshop. It has doors that open up into the main theater.
So like
that
the
behind
bathroom, like the public restrooms.
in
with
a way, it changed the programming. We changed the backstage program into the driving part of that project, and it's a long conversation for us to go through that I need visuals to take you through. But having elders at that conversation with us, having similar processes that we work with the land and the people who are from there to help us kind of steward a solution and have them part of that conversation, it might yield a slightly different outcome because there's different voices at the table for sure, but the process was consistent.
And maybe goes back to your first comment where all of those projects are, like, we call them layer cakes, because because our budgets are so constrained, they have to do like everything. So layer and layer and layer of program and function and stuff. And so they might not all look the same. And I think that also has something to do with longevity, because a lot of, maybe not the public washrooms, but Park and High Park and
They're
stuff, they're
temporary.
designed, they're very temporary. They're designed for like 2 years. They're mostly paint because we had $100,000. Like, that's all you can really do. But when there's bigger budgets and different programs, we still are confronted with having to do a lot in a small little space. So yeah, the backstage has to also be the ceremonial space
has to be
and the
more.
workshop. And the library has to do like a bunch of different things. It
Has to
can't
be
just be like
more
a
than the one
viewing
thing.
area. It's also like a classroom and a bunch of other things.
Yeah, and on that note, those libraries that we showed, they're glass boxes. We nailed the budget, we nailed the schedule. Check, got it. Put our hearts and souls into these projects. We love them. They're detailed the way we want them to be detailed. The material palette is perfect. The story about a library sitting on a single pier of concrete coming out of the ground on a riverbank is compelling. It does all the stuff that you want it to do as an architect. And we're proud of that work. And the bureaucrats toured the next architects that were commissioned to do another library to our library, and they said, these guys at Public City brought this in on budget and on schedule, and the client loves it. But you can't make your project look like this because this looks too expensive for Winnipeg. And that's the milieu that we work in. We're just like, are you kidding?
Yeah, I have stories like that with with Metrolinx. Made a suggestion once that would have been cheaper, but they said it would look expensive, and they didn't want to do it.
They didn't want to do it because, the public might think we spent public money on the public.
Yeah.
That's the rationale
God
that we're
forbid.
dealing with here.
So I'm glad you guys went long, but it does mean I'm gonna cut myself short to give them a few.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, I want to make a confession now, because in my introduction I had written something which I think comes from your language about meaning. You had written meaningfully engage with community, and I just read engage with community because I thought meaningful sounded a little saccharine. But actually, after seeing the lecture, and I was actually moved by your descriptions of your relationship with the people you worked with and with the group that was wearing the purple that was taking care of the bathroom, and I
Thank you.
put the meaningful back in. So
The meaningful back in.
it's great. It was really
Thank you.
very very touching.
Thank you, Robert.
So anyway, questions. We have time for a few, not too many.
That's fine.
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. This is really nice.
In the back, yes.
Hi, so thank you for sharing. So I really like the idea of making those public washroom really fun and accessible for everyone. And then, so I have a question about the city of Toronto, where the access to washroom is often tied to like private spaces, like malls or cafe. Then do you guys think that there's a need for a more truly public 3-level washroom in the city? And if so, what would it take to make that possible in the near future? Thank you.
It's a great question. Yes, can I?
Yeah, go
Yes.
for it.
So well, Liz gets to tell her joke, but I'm going to tell it for our nickname. Our nickname in Winnipeg amongst our peers is Public Shitty Architecture, because we do so many public washrooms. But haha, very funny. But it's a commitment that we've made, and it's just become the thing that we are known for. And I don't think we intended to become experts at it. I mean, I think all of us are experts at that condition of our life. With running,
It comes naturally.
it does. It comes naturally to all of you. We're not more of an expert on this issue than any of us in the room here. But this strange condition that we believe we can have a city that is somehow not connected to the body in any way, and that we should somehow not accept that basic function of living, whether we're salaried members of life or non-salaried members of life. It doesn't matter. We're all gonna be faced with this condition at least 2 or 3 times a day, everywhere, wherever we're moving in the city. This notion of having to, pay to use a washroom. I mean, there's certain parts that I accept about it, because if there's an attendant there, that's great. But we don't pay to use the road to drive our car in that same way. We do, but we don't see it.
407.
And the 407 you do. And we accept these really strange things about how to exist as a community together, which I just still fail to understand why it's so normal that it's so hard to defecate in the city. It sounds like an awful question or an awful thing to say, but when you just deprogram it, it's just it's a super normal problem that we're all facing. Why do we have so much difficulty discussing this? Every city should have an amazing public washroom program. We should tour the country checking out what Montreal does compared to New York City, and going to Tokyo. Tokyo has a marvelous public washroom program. It is unbelievable. And we are sort of in this strange, I don't know, are we overly Protestant? I don't know what it is. This kind of mindset of we don't want to discuss anything real in the city and pretend it can function. I could go on and on. The thing that I learned, about living in a city like Winnipeg is the cost of low taxes and the cost to all of us of not wanting to pay more for the world that we live in. I don't get it. Like, I'm not a socialist in that way. I just don't understand the basic math problem that all of us have about spending our money on ourselves. I just don't understand why we get so angry about things that seem wasteful to us that are for us. I don't really get it. And I don't think any of us gets it. I think we have our political arguments, but when you remove the politics and go to basic logic, none of it makes any sense. There should be washrooms everywhere, and it should be an awesome public program.
But what I'll say that what we've learned about the ones that are successful are the ones that have washroom attendants. So
That is the
it's
math.
super important, and we will not do a washroom anymore unless it has an attendant program. So that is the key, is having somebody there all the time, especially if it's somebody there that is a member of the community that it is serving, is better. And we're working on a project in Edmonton that we really pushed public washroom to a park, where we heard from the community that that was all they really wanted in the park. They don't care about anything else, just make a washroom there. But the washroom attendant also becomes like the public space attendant. So it is not about surveillance, it's about stewardship. And they are there to help people and to, make people feel safer and to talk to them and give people what they need. And that's 100% the key to success of a public washroom, for sure.
I think it's getting late, so I'm going to, one more question up front here, unless there are other people who, okay, two more. But two more.
Now that we're on to scatology, did you study any of the ancient examples? In Philippi, which is a vast archaeological site in near Kavila, which is northern Greece. I visited there. There's a amazing public washroom, and you can see it on Google.
They're amazing institutions.
Yeah, the attendance and everything.
Yeah.
But they put the effort into that by necessity, I suppose. Not having high technology for public sanitation. But have you studied any
Yes.
of those examples in the
Yes,
ancient world?
but I'm not a scholar.
Okay.
But yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. Next.
So I just want to ask, what makes a public place unique, timeless, and the most importantly, comforting, in your opinion?
Unique, timeless, and what?
And comforting.
Oh.
That's a great question for Liz. I might have thought.
Oh my God, I don't know.
You tell us again. Comforting.
Unique.
But I'll tell you. Okay, I can riff on that a little bit. I think a practice committed to public-facing work or publicly used work is fundamentally focused on. I want to be careful about this, but the sense of like belonging. I think public realm architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, public-facing law, legal, whatever aspect of professionalism that engages in publicly attuned commitments is about belonging. And I think that's a fundamental yearning. I fundamentally believe that's why we all choose to live in cities mostly. We yearn to commune. I think there are plenty of examples in everybody's lives that you've experienced that you feel excluded from. That could be related to history, it could be related to story, it could be related to identity, it could be related to politics, it just could be related to the lack of, what did you say, comfort coming into a space. And the loss of comfort kind of leads to a loss of belonging, and a loss of belonging leads to a feeling of exclusion, and a feeling of exclusion tends to lead to riot. So I mean, I think that's a trajectory.
Peter and Liz, I have a question.
Oh, here comes the hard ball.
Oh, it's not
Look what
hard.
you started.
It's hard for him.
Oh.
Because I'm just wondering about the association between unique and comforting, because often what is comforting is what is familiar, which requires repetition.
Which isn't unique.
Which is not the opposite. I mean, I
Yes.
know, there's this remarkable essay by Octavio Paz in which he talks about how the chain restaurants and the reproduction of, all sorts of things that we now think of as colonial practices,
Yes.
or are, but the reproduction of the familiar and the unfamiliar creates comfort. But I'm just wondering if you actually associate comfort and the uniqueness. Your projects are all unique, but I mean, in many, because this kind of circles around to the fact that in many cities, say public toilet infrastructures are systems, they are reproducible, and then when you see it, you know what it is, and it's, it's a comforting sight because you know you got one. So is uniqueness important? Your work is full of it, but
is our work unique? I don't.
Well, the
I think
individual, it has sensibility.
it has character. I mean, it might have a character on it,
Well,
so that's
it definitely
naturally
has
unique.
sensibility, but
Yeah.
which is different than. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get at this
Yes.
connection that you're making out there between comfort and uniqueness, whether or not they're bound together.
This
or-
conversation's reminding me of Monty Python, where, in the life of Brian, he says, "You are all individuals," and someone says, "I'm not." And
All right.
it's hard to belong and be unique, but it's like I have no answer for
frankly,
that one.
the answer is sometimes it's the one, sometimes it's the other. Sometimes there isn't really an answer, but it's a good question.
It is a
because
good question. I appreciate the
because it
question.
doesn't because I don't automatically associate comfort with uniqueness, but sometimes the unique thing is nice because it makes you feel you have a special environment. Anyway, we could go on, but we're not going to. So I'm going to thank you all, but don't leave yet, because I want to just a few public information announcements, okay? So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for coming to this inaugural lecture of the Harold Solomon Kaplan Lecture. Great to have you guys start it. It wasn't the last lecture in the public series, so I just, it's okay.
All right.
It's for visual studies, and they'll be very hurt if I don't mention this. As our public, so they have one coming up on next Tuesday on the 31st. It's with an Academy Award-winning filmmaker, Alexander Singh. And this year's ceremony, Singh and the art historian Natalie Musteta won an Oscar. Oh, the Oscar ceremony. And Oscars for their live-action short, Two People Exchanging Saliva. Yeah. Nothing to be ashamed of, right?
No.
Which tied with another film in the category, only the 7th such tie in the Academy Awards history. So if any of you are interested, it would be great to have you here next Tuesday. But, and in the Larry Wayne Richards Gallery behind me, there's Unruly Intelligence's Body. Again, Body. See, we're not ashamed here. Tools, AI. So if you feel inclined, go out and take a look at that. And thank you all for joining us here. And thank you for the lecture.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.